And retired Archbishop Eliud Wabukala, thank you so much for joining us here on KTN News Center. So let's begin first with tomorrow's commemoration of the Africa Anti-Corruption Day. What is it all about?
Thank you so much, Brenda, for inviting us to KTN studio, particularly to talk about the anti-corruption celebration, which is coming up tomorrow on Saturday. This is a day that is fronted by the Kenya Leadership and Integrity Forum. That is the entire groups of people in Kenya who are championing the fight against corruption, to join other African countries to commemorate the 4th anniversary of the Corruption Day. Perhaps to appreciate this day, I want to inform you that in July 2003, African nations adopted the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption as a continent. And since 2006, African countries which have signed this convention come together to commemorate this day. As I speak, we have 44 countries, including Kenya, that have signed this protocol. Now, their aim is to declare their commitment to fight corruption and implement procedures that will help their countries be free from corruption. And as a result, many anti-corruption laws have been developed in various countries. In our own country, Kenya, our constitution has put in place mechanisms to fight corruption.
So, Mr. Chair,
we also have yes.
So, Mr. Chair,
yes, Brenda.
You have given us, a background on what this commemoration of the Africa Anti-Corruption Day is all about. But let's bring it back home. What strategies has the EACC put in place to ensure that corruption becomes successful in the country?
Oh, yes, I was coming back home, and with that background, Kenya has set up agencies that help to fight corruption. And the leading agency is EACC. And at EACC, the fight against corruption has 3 strategies, and of course 4, which include the following. EACC works on high-impact investigations, which is based on the personalities involved, the value of laws, and public interest in those matters. We focus on capital-intensive projects which are implemented by the national government and also county governments. Because corruption is rampant, the Commission has to be strategic in handling the cases that will have the highest impact on the economy of our country. The second aspect is asset tracing and recovery. Our Commission is focusing on financial investigations and also the status of proceeds of crime and Money Laundering Act, so that we ensure that property taken is traced and recovered. Our aim is to ensure that corruption does not pay. The third strategy is prevention, public awareness, and education. The essence is to be proactive to mitigate corruption in Kenya. And as you can agree with me, corruption, prevention of corruption is the best method.
But when we're
because
talking
it will be least expensive. Yes, madam.
When you're talking about, asset recovery in terms of money that has been looted, public funds, how much has the EACC recovered?
We have recovered a lot of resources, which I can give you in a minute. The resources mostly involve public land, cash, and of course assets which are movable. EACC, for example, has recovered about 17 billion. 10.9 billion was recovered in the last financial year. These assets include Woodley Estate houses in Nairobi, 1,800 acres of land that belonged to Kalero in Naivasha, a land allocated to Rescos Primary School in Nairobi. There are over 357 cases pending in the courts, which we intend to recover about 8.6 billion. So in short, that's kind of scenario of the recoveries that are being made.
And so, Mr. Chair, when you're talking about the number of cases that are pending in court, corruption cases that are pending in court, there has been concern also with the judicial service, the judiciary, about the sort of evidence that the EACC and the Office of the Public Prosecution gives. And that is something that the Chief Justice David Maraga has always talked about, because at the judiciary is about matters evidence. So by the time EACC is working with the DPP to take a case in court, do you have enough evidence that will prove that the person you're taking to court will be charged guilty when it comes to matters corruption?
Yes, Brenda, I should say immediately that yes, we have, before we take a case to court, we will have established proper evidence. And this one can be corroborated by the DPP that 99% of the investigations subpoenaed to him by EACC he's in agreement with us. I also want to say that about 70% of the cases that have been in court have also been acquired conviction. And therefore, EACC has, and it still continues, to do thorough work. But perhaps for you to appreciate what we do, at EACC, work is done in teamwork. When the report center receives a case, that case is straight away put into a team that finds out whether it is a viable case or not. And then it is progressed through, again, a team investigation. And then it will get into evidence analysis, which is also under team investigation. And at the end, it comes up to what we call the enforcement committee, which is chaired by a lawyer who is a commissioner and attended by a big team. Now, the evidence adduced in that case is discussed by the entire team and agreed upon. Then that case is ready for signing. It's taken to the chair and the CEO to sign to present to the DPP.
All right.
And perhaps also to help.
All right.
I wanted just to say, to appreciate the process, because people have misconceptions about who is responsible for what. Once EACC has taken the case to DPP, it becomes the property of the DPP. And once the DPP goes to court, then it is the work of the judiciary. And therefore, it is a chain that is working so smoothly to ensure that justice is achieved
in
the fight against corruption.
So, Mr. Chair, what is the working relationship between the office of the DPP and your office, that is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission? Because some time back, there are concerns that there was no good working relationship between the two offices when handling corruption cases, especially when it came to matters evidence.
Thank you so much for that question, Brenda. I joined the EACC in 2017, and what our rallying call as commissioners is to create a team of EACC working to help Kenya against corruption. And with that, we cannot do that alone. So we had to make sure that our working relationship with the DPP is seamless. And I want to assure you that today, our work and our collaboration is 100% together.
All right, and
there is no rift. We are together in this. So that misconception, Brenda, I want to assure the listeners that, and those who are viewing, that is never there again. Even my CEO and the DPP have appeared somewhere in media several times. And therefore, I want to assure you that this work is being done professionally and for the best interest of the country.
So, Mr. Chair, we've heard of the adage, prevention is better than cure. I'm so sure you've heard about it. But does that apply in this case of corruption in the country? And so what is EACC doing to prevent corruption and make Kenya a corrupt-free society?
Yes, as I alluded to earlier, prevention is better than cure. And for us at EACC, we carry out several activities. First, we look at the public entities, help them to examine their systems, so that if there are risks and loopholes, we help them to seal those loopholes which can encourage corruption. We also have developed codes of ethics for public officers. We help them to obey and keep these codes. We also carry out public education and awareness so that everybody helps us to fight corruption. We proactively deal with declaration of wealth forms and provide advisories to prevent corruption where we think it is around. As I mentioned earlier, we have, through proactive methods, prevented corruption in many entities in the public sector. Perhaps you are aware that the Bribery Act 2016 also mandates us to work with the private sector. And because of this, we can collaborate with the private sector, like media, for example, to help to prevent corruption through public awareness
and Mr. Chair,
and education.
Mr. Chair, you're talking about, when you've answered this question, you've talked about working with different people from different walks of life when it comes to the fight against corruption. But as we know it, any time, a politician or a high-ranking personality in the society has been accused of corruption, we've always seen some political defense. So my question is, as EACC, as the chair of the Anti-Graft Commission, are there some people within the society who are untouchable?
Well, that is a perception that the public sometimes have. When we work at the EACC, with all the steps I've mentioned, our work is professional. We don't look at the person, political persuasion, or at his tribal inclination. We look at the offense that is committed. And in this case, we have approached the society at large to understand that fighting corruption is for their good, and that anybody found capable of corruption should carry their own cross, because what they do deprives society of a lot of things. It creates unemployment, it destroys our infrastructure of roads, it destroys our health system, and in the long run, it destroys the entire society. And so through public awareness and education, we call upon all Kenyans to help fight corruption.
And Mr. Chair, there are several incidences whereby some politicians, leaders within the county, some county bosses have been accused of corruption and they're facing corruption cases at the court. Yet, it is required that when you have been accused of corruption, when you're facing a corruption case, when you have a corruption case at the court, you are supposed to step aside so as to pave way for investigations. But that is not what we are seeing with some county bosses. Some of them, as we speak, are still serving their county residents. Has EACC challenged this situation at the courts?
Well, Brenda, as I have mentioned, the war against corruption is actually still in a process. Quite recently, there was no such a move until a court ruling that came to help us ask for people to step aside. I think that was last year. So based on that ruling, several governors and state officers are out of their work. But there were some cases which had already occurred before that ruling, and the officers were still in office. And those are a few cases I can recall, about 2 or 3, which of course EACC has challenged. And I think the process is still on. We shall see the outcome later, because the courts have their own calendars. Yes, but I want to assure you that EACC, following the law, does challenge those issues.
All right, so what do you think are the challenges facing the judicial system in the fight against corruption? Because we've seen a back and forth blame game, the judicial service, the judiciary blaming the EACC for not doing enough, EACC saying that they have done enough, they presented the evidence that's needed in court.
Well, I don't buy into that idea of the blame game now, because as we stand today, Brenda, the working relationship between EACC, the DPP, and the judiciary is very good. But I want to mention the challenges which the judicial system is facing, perhaps. One, there is the slow judicial process, which is not their mistake at all. It is the nature of making sure the accused person has a say and understands that he has been heard. But as a result, we lose witnesses, and also sometimes people get compromised, and therefore we find our cases then being difficult to achieve. We also have the challenge of perhaps compromise within the justice system. Perhaps the judicial officers or the witnesses being interfered with. Those could be challenges. And another challenge which keeps recurring is inadequate resources, because investigation of cases and adjudication are very expensive. So, and some of these cases are very complex. They demand perhaps people traveling out of the country, and therefore they need a lot of resources. So those are some of the challenges, Brenda, that I see. Yeah, well, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, retired Archbishop Eliud Bukala, the chairperson of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, talking to us about zero corruption quest in the country.